In the shadowed corridors of power where the Tiber River wound its way through the ancient heart of Rome, a single man had risen like a colossus over the Republic. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar, and by 44 BC, his legend had already eclipsed that of almost every leader who had come before him. Victorious in Gaul, where he had subdued fierce tribes and expanded Rome's borders dramatically, he had crossed the Rubicon River in a daring gamble that ignited civil war. Now, after years of conflict, he stood supreme as dictator for life. The Senate had granted him this extraordinary power, but it came with a dangerous undercurrent of fear and envy. Caesar moved through the city with the confidence of a man who believed he could reshape the world, yet in the grand halls and private chambers of the elite, whispers of discontent were growing into something far more sinister. Caesar's achievements were undeniable and transformative. He had stabilized the chaotic economy, reformed the bloated calendar that had fallen out of sync with the seasons, extended citizenship to more provinces, and launched ambitious public works that promised jobs and glory for the people. To the common citizens of Rome, the merchants, the veterans, the families struggling in the Subura district, he represented hope and strength after decades of bloody internal strife. They cheered his triumphs and saw in him a protector who put Rome first. But among the old aristocratic families, the optimates, who had long controlled the Senate and guarded their privileges jealously, Caesar was viewed as an existential threat. They feared he would crown himself king, ending the republic that had defined Roman identity for over 4 centuries. This fear, mixed with personal grudges and thwarted ambitions, created a perfect storm for betrayal. At the center of the gathering conspiracy stood Marcus Junius Brutus, a man of deep philosophical learning. Influenced by the teachings of Plato and the Stoics, Brutus was widely admired for his supposed integrity and commitment to republican ideals. Caesar had every reason to trust him. During the Civil War, Brutus had fought on the side of Pompey, Caesar's great rival. Yet when the conflict ended, Caesar not only pardoned him but elevated him to high positions, treating him almost as a favored son. This generosity should have secured loyalty, but Brutus carried the heavy burden of ancestry. His family traced its line back to the legendary Lucius Junius Brutus, who had helped overthrow Rome's last tyrannical king centuries earlier. That legacy weighed on him like chains. He convinced himself that by acting against Caesar, he would be upholding the sacred duty to liberty, even if it meant plunging a blade into the heart of a man who had shown him nothing but kindness. Alongside Brutus was Gaius Cassius Longinus, a shrewd, battle-hardened senator whose envy of Caesar's unparalleled glory burned with unrelenting intensity. Cassius saw Caesar's successes as a personal affront, diminishing his own achievements in the field. He was a master of persuasion, skillfully weaving arguments that played on the fears of others. Together, Brutus and Cassius drew in more than 60 senators and influential figures, each with their own motives, some ideological, some driven by jealousy, others by the promise of restored influence. They met in secret, debating the morality and necessity of their plan. The air in those hidden gatherings was thick with tension, as they justified their conspiracy as a noble act to save the Republic from tyranny. Yet beneath the rhetoric lay the uncomfortable truth. They were preparing to murder a man who had repeatedly spared their lives and advanced the very city they claimed to love. As the fateful month of March unfolded, the city of Rome pulsed with uneasy energy. Caesar was preparing for a major campaign against the Parthians in the east, a venture that many believed would bring even greater power and possibly a permanent shift toward monarchy. Rumors spread like wildfire through the forums and marketplaces. Caesar would return not as dictator but as king, complete with a crown and divine honors. These whispers terrified the conspirators, pushing them to act before it was too late. On the evening of March 14th, a heavy sense of foreboding fell over Caesar's household. His devoted wife Calpurnia awoke screaming from a nightmare in which she cradled her husband's lifeless, bloodied body while their home crumbled around them. Shaken, she pleaded with him not to attend the Senate meeting scheduled for the next day. Caesar, a man of reason who often scoffed at superstition, found himself moved by her distress and the warnings of a soothsayer who had earlier urged him to beware the Ides of March. For a moment, he hesitated, but duty and confidence won out. He dismissed the omens and set out toward the theater of Pompey, where the Senate had convened that day because the Curia was under renovation. The stage was set for one of history's most infamous acts of treachery. As Caesar entered the grand chamber and took his seat, the conspirators moved with calculated precision. Under the guise of presenting a petition to restore some exiled senators, they crowded around him. Suddenly, one man seized the hem of Caesar's toga, yanking it down to expose his neck and shoulders. That was the signal. The first dagger flashed forward, striking Caesar in the shoulder. Chaos erupted. Senators who had been friends and colleagues moments before became assailants, stabbing wildly in a frenzy of panic and determination. Caesar fought back fiercely at first, grabbing one attacker's arm and crying out. But when he turned and saw Brutus among them, knife raised, the great conqueror's resistance crumbled. The words he reportedly uttered in that devastating moment, "T2, Brute," echo through the ages as a cry of ultimate betrayal. Even you, Brutus? Overwhelmed by more than 20 wounds, Caesar collapsed at the foot of a statue of his old enemy Pompey. His blood pooled on the cold marble floor, a stark symbol of the Republic's own impending fracture. The assassins, drenched in blood, raised their daggers triumphantly and proclaimed that they had liberated Rome from tyranny. For a fleeting instant, they believed they had succeeded. But the consequences of their act would unravel everything they held dear. News of the assassination tore through Rome like a tempest. Panic gripped the streets. Citizens barricaded themselves in their homes, fearing riots or reprisals. Mark Antony, Caesar's fiercely loyal co-consul and battle companion, narrowly escaped the same fate by fleeing in disguise. The conspirators, expecting acclaim as heroes, instead faced a city on the edge of collapse. Brutus addressed the crowd in the forum, his voice steady as he explained their noble intentions. They had killed a tyrant to restore freedom and the old ways of the Republic. For a brief time, the stunned populace seemed willing to listen. Yet the love and gratitude ordinary Romans felt for Caesar ran far deeper than the senators had calculated. The turning point came at Caesar's public funeral. Mark Antony, a masterful orator and strategist, seized the moment. Standing before the massive crowd with Caesar's blood-stained robe held high, he recounted the dictator's countless victories, his clemency toward enemies, and the tangible ways he had improved daily life for the people. He dramatically read aloud from Caesar's will, revealing generous bequests of money and land to the common citizens. Grief ignited into fury. The mob surged forward, rioting through the streets, burning the houses of the conspirators, and hunting down anyone associated with the plot. The assassins, once bold in the Senate, were now forced to flee the city under cover of darkness, their dreams of restored Republican glory shattered almost immediately. This was merely the opening act of a sweeping revenge that would consume the Roman world. In the dangerous power vacuum, three men stepped forward to avenge Caesar and stabilize the state. Mark Antony, the passionate and battle-scarred general; Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, a reliable supporter with military resources; and, most crucially, a young man of only 18 named Gaius Octavius. Caesar had secretly adopted him as his heir, renaming him Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus in his will. Few at the time could have predicted that this slight, calculating youth would become one of history's greatest leaders, known to posterity as Augustus. The Second Triumvirate was formed, a powerful alliance that immediately set about consolidating control. They issued proscription lists, cold, calculated documents naming hundreds of enemies for execution or exile. Many who had sympathized with the conspirators or simply possessed wealth the new regime desired were hunted down. The streets of Rome and the provinces ran with the blood of those deemed threats. Meanwhile, Brutus and Cassius had escaped to the east, raising formidable armies and positioning themselves as the last defenders of the Republic. The stage was prepared for a final, cataclysmic confrontation. The climax unfolded in 42 BC on the plains of Philippi in northern Greece. The armies of the triumvirate clashed with those of the assassins in two brutal battles. The fighting was savage, with legions crashing against each other in clouds of dust and steel. Cassius, misinterpreting the outcome of the first engagement and believing all was lost, fell on his own sword in despair. Brutus fought on with grim determination, rallying his men and displaying the philosophical resolve he had always prized. But defeat was inevitable. Surrounded and facing capture, Brutus chose to end his life by the same blade that had struck Caesar. His final moments were marked by a poignant reflection on the cost of his choices, a tragic acknowledgement that the path he had taken in the name of liberty had led only to more death and the very tyranny he sought to prevent. Even with the primary conspirators gone, the cycle of revenge and power struggles continued unabated. Lepidus was gradually marginalized and stripped of real authority. The alliance between Antony and Octavian, always fragile, fractured under the weight of ambition. Antony's growing entanglement with Cleopatra, the captivating queen of Egypt, provided Octavian with powerful propaganda. He painted Antony as a man who had abandoned Roman virtues for Eastern decadence and foreign influence, rallying support back in Italy. Tensions escalated until the decisive naval showdown at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's fleet, commanded with strategic brilliance by his trusted general Agrippa, outmaneuvered and crushed the forces of Antony and Cleopatra. The defeated lovers fled to Egypt, where both eventually took their own lives. Antony by the sword, Cleopatra by the bite of an asp, bringing an end to their grand but doomed alliance. With all major rivals eliminated, Octavian stood supreme. In 27 BC, he masterfully accepted the title of Augustus, presenting his rule not as monarchy, but as a refined restoration of republican institutions. He maintained the appearance of Senate authority while centralizing real power, reforming the military, administration, and economy with remarkable skill. His long reign brought the Pax Romana, a golden era of relative peace and prosperity that stretched across the Mediterranean world. The man who had methodically avenged his adoptive father had transformed Rome from a fractured republic into a stable empire that would endure for centuries. The consequences of the Ides of March rippled outward for generations. The republic that Brutus and his allies had desperately tried to preserve died not with Caesar's last breath, but in the wars that followed. Their act of betrayal, intended to safeguard liberty, instead accelerated the very one-man rule they feared. Thousands perished in the ensuing civil conflicts, soldiers on distant battlefields, families torn apart by proscriptions, entire communities devastated by marching armies. The Roman world was forever altered, its political landscape reshaped by the ambition and loyalty of those who survived. Yet within this tale of bloodshed and upheaval lie profound lessons about human nature, power, and morality. Julius Caesar's extraordinary life illustrates both the heights of visionary leadership and the perils of concentrating too much authority in one individual. His clemency toward former enemies, including Brutus, highlights the complexities of trust in politics, sometimes a strength, sometimes a fatal vulnerability. Brutus embodies the tragic idealist, a man of principle whose rigid sense of duty blinded him to the human cost of his actions and the unpredictable forces he would unleash. His betrayal was not born of petty hatred, but of a deeply held belief in the greater good, making his story all the more heartbreaking. Cassius, by contrast, represents the corrosive influence of envy and personal grievance, showing how self-interest can masquerade as patriotism. Mark Antony and especially Octavian demonstrate the enduring power of loyalty and strategic patience. Their pursuit of justice, though marked by the ruthlessness common to their era, ultimately restored order and laid foundations for centuries of achievement. Augustus learned critical lessons from Caesar's fate. He avoided overt symbols of kingship, cultivated broad support, and focused on effective governance rather than spectacle. His success proved that true strength often lies in wisdom, restraint, and the ability to build lasting institutions. As we stand more than 2,000 years removed from those fateful events, the story of Caesar's betrayal and the sweeping revenge that followed remains irresistibly compelling. It captures the timeless drama of human ambition, the fragility of political systems, and the heavy weight of moral choices. In our modern world, where debates over leadership, loyalty, and institutional trust continue to divide societies, this ancient narrative offers sobering guidance. It warns against the dangers of sudden, violent solutions to complex problems and reminds us that dialogue, compromise, and thoughtful reform are far more likely to produce enduring stability than daggers in the dark. The blood spilled on the marble floor of the theater of Pompey did not buy freedom. Instead, it fertilized the ground from which the Roman Empire would grow. The conspirators' daggers ended one remarkable life, but could not extinguish the ideas of strong, effective leadership that Caesar championed. In the end, it was the Avengers, those who honored loyalty and pursued justice with purpose, who shaped the future. Their triumph, though forged in conflict, brought a new chapter of Roman greatness. Reflecting on this epic chapter of history, we are reminded that betrayal wounds not only its immediate victim, but echoes through time, affecting countless lives. True justice demands more than retribution. It requires vision to create something better from the ashes. The story urges every generation to cherish trust, value stability, and approach power with humility and foresight. The Ides of March and its aftermath stand as an eternal testament to the intricate dance between ambition and consequence, loyalty and downfall, darkness and the enduring light of human resilience. In studying these events, we gain not just knowledge of the past, but wisdom for navigating our own uncertain times, ensuring that the lessons of Rome continue to illuminate the path forward.